Broadcasting from Salisbury University campus, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7, putting Delmarva first. Stay tuned for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
U.S. Surgeon General has called it America's other drug problem that is failing to take your prescribed medicine. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. It's estimated that we take about half of the medications that are prescribed. There's also an estimate of as much as $300 billion in annual costs as a result of things ranging from hospitalization and emergency room visits to wasted pills. For the individual, it can be detrimental not only financially, but also in one's recovery. But there are devices being developed aimed at ensuring you are taking the medicine that has been prescribed. In our studio this morning is Joel Feldman, who's president of Terrapin Pharmacy and Mediherent, LLC. Also, Dimitri Kavathis, CEO of the Lower Shore Clinic. And we also have Lori Brewster, who is the health officer for Wacomico and Somerset counties. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So, Dimitri, I'm going to start with you. And how I've sort of outlined a bit about how big of a problem this is. What's your assessment? What are the numbers you're looking at? What kind of impression are you looking at?
Yeah, from the national perspective, it's very scary to find out that not a lot of research has occurred around medication errors. And medical errors are, if not the leading cause of death, it's one of the top leading causes of death in this country. And medication errors is part of that issue. When you look at the research, and you could see, for example, something from 1995, where they did 4,031 adult admissions at 2 USA hospitals over a 6-month period. They had error rates of 49% of errors occurring in the drug ordering stage, 11% in transcription, 14% in dispensing, and 26% in administration. And the error rates are quite astonishing because there's lots of different levels of compliance and complexity that occurs when you're administering medications. People think you just prescribe the medicine, people take it, and that's it. But in fact, there's all these different levels that occur in every medical space. And in my field, which is focused on behavioral health, the research is paltry. I could find one that was of recent of research around 10 years ago. So one of the problems with medication errors, as far as identifying the issue, tracking it, is that it's very complex to do that because you're relying in the end on human beings, right?
Right.
So the whole idea of trying to minimize medication errors is in and of itself a very complex problem. And that's why working with Joel and Terrapin Pharmacy with the Mediherent machine has been so revolutionary for us. And I have more data I could throw out to you as we go.
Well, let me ask you this. In terms of the kinds of people who do not take their medication or do not take it properly, is there a particular group, and is it older people in particular as opposed to younger? Do you have a sense about that?
Well, this is an issue across the board of all age groups. You look at just a straight antibiotic, right? 10 days, you take it. I think the last research I saw around the compliance of that, people get to the 6th day, they feel better, and they stop. So it's really not even a age issue, gender issue, anything like that. There is, I think, more complexity with the more medicine you take, and that's what impacts the population. So if you look at people, for example, with complex medical needs, people with psychiatric issues, COPD, metabolic syndrome issues, those people take 8, 10 medications, different times of the day, and that's where you have all these different opportunities to make errors.
So, by the way, any individual kind of example you can give us of somebody who, say, finds themselves in a situation where they failed to take their medicine and it's had an adverse effect?
We've had many people at our organization who, for various reasons, have had errors occur in other places as well as ours, where they'll have an adverse reaction. And I have a list of just some of the adverse reactions that occur. One of them is tardive dyskinesia, which is sort of this issue that occurs over time where you have involuntary shaking. You have just harm resulting from allergic reactions because allergic conditions weren't identified. You know, the issue around medical records, for example, and information transfer, even in Maryland is really in the lead in most places around this country. We have a backbone system called CRISP where we are exchanging information from hospitals to providers. But that exchange is still very fragmented. It's still very difficult at times to even get information. And as an organization, we have a lot of people involved in people's daily care. And even that can get so complicated. If you have someone in the ER and there's all this chaos that's happening, because that's what, unfortunately, ERs are dealing with, right? Triaging emergencies. And then you have shifts that occur. People change. Information exchange is just one of the big issues. And the best way to describe that is, the game of telephone. You start with one story. By the time you get to the other, there's a whole other story.
So and one of the things that struck me as I was sort of looking at this is that a lot of the tracking in terms of making sure that, say, your patient is taking the right doses, it's just simply there's a self-reporting process that you don't really know what's going on the other end.
Yeah, there's lots of different ranges around this. So you have people that live in the community, they're taking their medicine on their own. We have no idea half the time what's going on. Then you have levels of supervision, which we have, where we have up to 40 hours of supervision in certain houses, and then I have 24-hour supervision in certain houses. And believe it or not, even the 24-hour supervision, when I first got to the organization in 2015, the first quarter I was there were 40 medication errors. 40. It was a huge issue. And you're talking about the human factor. You got human error occurring. If you have people with multiple conditions, multiple medications that have to take it at different times, even with people focused on that, there is error that occurs. And if you think about the opportunities of error, if you have 10 medications a day, 30 days of the week, right? And then you have all those different opportunities on a daily basis for that to occur, it's going to happen. So the whole idea is to think about what are we going to do to try to reduce error? How can we leverage technology to do that, which is where Terrapin comes in with their Medherent machine. And, there's no ill intent among staff as far as, trying to get the medications right. They're just doing their best. But it's complicated. And, even me, I have a couple decades under me of experience. There's no doubt I'd make medication errors. It's just too complicated. So you have to think about ways to try to leverage that.
Now, Laura, I want to turn to you. So what do you see and what kind of concern is to the county and to the kind of health system that you're operating, where you find these problems where some people, they might get medication, but they don't take it, and they may find up, say, in an emergency room or in something even more dire?
Well, I think one of the issues that we see is an individual having multiple providers and no one individual knowing exactly all the medications that somebody's on. And there may be some adverse reactions from the mixture of medications that individuals are taking, and or they may be taking two types of the same medication, which lands them back into the hospital or the emergency department. Because of not being able to understand what medications and how to take them. And I know what Dimitri is talking about with individuals that are on upwards of 10 and 11 medications, particularly those that have chronic illness. And a lot of the behavioral health clients have chronic illnesses that lend them to other types of somatic care medications, and that can be an issue for them.
And also, I mean, there's one things I've noticed is obviously there's a grain of the shore, as it were, so that you have many older people who oftentimes have a whole set of fill boxes and that kind of thing. I mean, you've seen as this population ages, that's more prominent now than maybe was before? Or?
Absolutely. And as you get older, you take more medications, which lends itself to risk of non-compliance or not understanding what medications you should be taking.
And Dimitri, in terms of older people, I mean, that seems to me, I mean, I my parents are gone now, but I remember both of them towards the end of their lives. I mean, there might be like maybe 6 or 7 medications. Yeah. Including some blood pressure medication. I can remember my mother, for example, she would call me up and had these heart palpitations. I'd say, well, take your pill. Well, she didn't know whether or not she'd taken her pill because she didn't have a great memory. And then she would be fine. So it just seems as if the older you get, then the more complicated it gets, and you get these huge boxes full of all these pills.
There's no doubt about it. We have a senior program for people that are in their 60s and above, and we have about 55 people that come to that program every day. It's astonishing sometimes how many medications are there. We really work hard to try to minimize as many as we can because of the cross-interaction issues and the complexity of it. But if you don't have help to do it, it's very difficult. And if you think about, for example, people with mental illness, they have cognitive impairments, thought impairments, memory issues, and that in and of itself creates its own complexity. Most people don't know that people with serious and persistent mental illness die 25 years younger than the general population. And one of the reasons is because of the complex morbidity. It's not really revolving around the psychiatric issues as much as the fact that they're medical conditions, diabetes, COPD, cancer. I believe the last data I saw was that 44% of all cigarettes smoked in this country are smoked by people with serious and persistent mental illness. So you have many issues going on that impact their ability to take medication reliably. There's a tendency to switch doctors a lot, right? Consistency in medical treatment. When you go to the hospital, they might make changes too. So there's things happening all the time which create massive opportunities for medication errors.
Is there, by the way, are there any particular ailments that tend to produce this kind of inconsistency as opposed to maybe others that people, they take them with religiously? I mean, what is there any particular area? Or
I mean, if you have people with thought disorders like schizophrenia, for example,
okay.
The ability to manage things at times is very difficult. And unless a person's in their recovery phase where they're doing well, they're working, everything's going well, that can be a real big problem in and of itself. And then you have people with mood disorders when they have anxiety a lot of times combined in there with them. And when you're anxious or you're maybe in a hyper state, you might have a very difficult time remembering things and doing things properly.
And Lauren, are there specific things that the county is doing to try to deal with this, or what's your interaction there?
Well, we do a lot of work with the elderly, making home visits, as well as with the mental health population, making home visits. So what we typically do is make sure that all of the medications that individuals are on, that they are supposed to be taking, that a physician has not discontinued one of those, which we do see a lot of times. What happens with the elderly population particularly is they will have several different medications for the same disorder, and they're not real sure which one they're supposed to take. So we do medication monitoring when we go out and do our home visits with individuals, very similar to what Dimitri was talking about, making sure that they're on the right medication at the right time of day for the right purpose.
So there are lots of machines that are now coming on the market in order to deal with this. I want to turn to you, Joel, and tell me a little bit about, well, first of all, how did you get into the idea of maybe if we just do some technology here,
Sure.
we can at least solve some of the problem? How did you get involved with that?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on, Don. First of all, let me say to you that how fortunate this community is to have an organization like Go-Getters and Lower Shore Clinic. The work that they do on behalf of the most vulnerable people in this community and throughout society is extraordinary. And I think they're particularly lucky here. And we work with agencies, mental health agencies throughout the state. Then in Dimitri, there's a person in this community who could just as easily be running a Fortune 500 company.
God bless you. Thank you.
And I'm serious about that. And, that he's here in Salisbury working on behalf of this community here and throughout the Eastern Shore is such a fortunate situation for the community. And I just want your audience to know that. Anyway, I'll get to the technology now. The technology came about because our pharmacy, Terrapin Pharmacy, focuses virtually exclusively on servicing agencies that care for people with severe and persistent mental illness. A number of years ago, and this goes back to 2011 and 2012, as we began to really focus on the issues of adherence And we actually have trademarked the slogan, medication adherence is our mission, because we recognize that in working with this community, nothing was more important than making sure that people took their meds, as Lori referenced, the right meds in the right dose at the right time. Early on, we began using the packaging that you often see now on television advertised by Amazon and PillPack. We bought that technology around 2007. I wish I had been as smart as Amazon and PillPack. I'd be a billionaire now, but we've done just fine with this. And so we began using that adherence packaging. And one of the aspects of it was to coordinate all of a person's medications, both psych meds and the somatic meds, to treat the entire conditions across all comorbidities. It was interesting. We had seen some very rudimentary technology where you could use that packaging in machines to dispense these meds, but there were inherent problems with it. One day I happened to be at a meeting with Dimitri, and Dimitri told a story about one of the consumers that they worked with, a woman, an elderly woman who was a diabetic, and she was in what's known as an assertive community treatment program, where the agency is required to go out between 4 and 7 times a month to visit this person. Typically a person with severe and persistent mental illness who, when they deinstitutionalized, was placed in independent housing. The staff went to see her on a Monday. Everything was fine. They came back for a visit on Friday, and she's been lying on the floor in a diabetic coma for 2 days. And, I started thinking about what did that mean in relation to the type of technology that I had seen, and I thought, there's a real role here for, as technology was advancing, to develop something that would dramatically improve adherence. Because if you believe that medication, I guess the threshold question is, do you believe adherence to medication and medication itself improves the quality of life and their health? Well, once you get over that threshold, and once you look at what's happening today, with the emergence of various technologies, it just seemed to be an interesting place to go.
So what makes what you've developed then different from, say, other people, or what are the similarities and differences that we're looking at then?
Most of the technology that has been out there in terms of medication adherence are basically consumer type items. They have to load their own medications. They may alert people as to when they should take their meds. So, for example, there are things like smart pill caps, where you put the medication into a vial, you put a cap on it, the cap rings. That's advanced to where it may send a signal via the internet or whatever to a caregiver. But that technology was limited, because that meant that a person, for example, who's on 10 medications would have had 10 pill bottles ringing all at one time. We looked at the packaging and we thought, we should develop a device, and what the device we came to realize would be something like a smart vending machine. So we built a smart vending machine. From scratch. We patented it, and we used a basic Android tablet that we embedded in the machine. And so those machines are run wirelessly, and they're integrated into our pharmacy system. So once the pharmacy does the critical work, which is reaching out to the caregivers, reaching out to prescribers, and getting all of the patient's medications so that they're not using multiple providers, or even when they're using multiple providers, we're making sure that we're getting all of the medications, that there's no contraindications on those medications. We package them in this pouch packaging, and we load them into the machine as though they're candy bars. And that's integrated into the pharmacy system. And what happens is it tells the person the right time to take each med. And once they do that and they activate the unit, it automatically populates an electronic medication record. And it also alerts the caregivers through mobile apps as to whether that person's taken the medication or not. So that in real time, caregivers can actually monitor what's going on with that patient and making sure that they take their meds. And the result of that has been is that the adherence rates for people using this type of technology has improved from anywhere from 40 to 50% to in excess of 90%.
So how important then is the caregiver then in this sort of triangle that you've set up then?
Caregivers play an extremely important role. The most important thing that they do, and what we like to say about what the technology has done, is, as Dimitri described, within the context of taking care of people with severe mental illness or people that are high-risk complex patients, the medication management aspect of their care can be extremely chaotic. What we've done is we've brought order to the chaos. And one of the ways we do that is by constantly reaching out to the caregivers and advising them when a person, for example, needs a new prescription. It's really incumbent upon us as the pharmacy, and I think that's how our model differs from your typical retail pharmacies, CVS, Walgreens, Walmart, whatever they may be, is that we are actively engaged with the caregivers and with the prescribers to make sure that all of that patient's medications are combined in that packaging so that the 8 a.m. dose, if they're on 10 medications, they have 10 meds at the right time. And then if they're on different meds at 8 p.m., they have the right meds on the 8 p.m. dose. So there's a consistency and there's a continuity in terms of what is happening with their medication management.
So what has been the reaction then from the medical community, particularly doctors who obviously are interacting with their patients, and how this works? What kind of feedback are you getting?
Well, I think the prescribers find it to be extremely innovative. I think they're surprised because they really don't know that it's out there. We have recently been awarded an NIH grant that's being conducted over the course of 2 years. NIH, it was a very competitive process, and NIH made us this award for purposes of looking at how effective a technology like this is in fact in improving adherence. But the best person to talk to about this is in fact Dimitri, because one of the things he is, and I know I talked about him just before this, but it's innovation. It's about innovation, and it's about people in this field recognizing that you can innovate and you can improve. By innovating, you can improve the quality of life of so many people. So I'll turn it over to him, because they are using right now in Salisbury, Maryland, is the greatest deployment of this technology in the country. And I truly believe that this technology, or technology similar to this, will ultimately be in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of homes, because eventually we have to find a way to keep people living in place longer as a society. And one of the primary reasons they can't is because they can't manage their meds. And what Dimitri has done is he's run with this concept, and rather than me talk about it, I'll turn it over to him.
Dimitri, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Joel. When we talk about evolution or revolution, this is a revolution. The ability to be able to manage people's medications that is virtually free of error. I gave you the number earlier that when I first got here, we had 40 errors in the first quarter. In the last 6 months, we've had 6 errors. Now, some people might think, oh my God, 6 errors, I'll take that against any health facility in this country. It's really a remarkable event that's occurring. And how do we know that? We know that because the machines are telling us that the person has triggered the machine to take the medication. We actually have staff available that are watching to make sure and monitor that people are taking the medicine. And that the error rate is so low because the pharmacy is directly loading the machine inside the house. So my staff are not touching it. They're not trained to really understand and really deal with this in a really good way. And quite honestly, even people who are professionals, nursing, doctors, they make mistakes. Me and Joel know of a physician who has to take medications and he makes errors. He's a medical doctor. So when we have this ability to go have a robot take the medication, put it in these packets, they look like, candy wrapper packets, whatever you want to call it. And then they're labeled, they have the person's name, they have the time, they have the list of medications, and it's in the machine, and it's tamper-proof to their credit. This machine, which is made in America, you can take a baseball bat to it, and it's not going to break open. So the security is really good. That medicine comes out, they tear open the little packet, the person takes the medicine. And the ability to be able to say that is really quite remarkable. And guess what? When we know someone hasn't hit that button, we get an alert. We can go see what's going on, what's happening with the person. And then from a rehabilitation perspective, where our goal is to take people with psychiatric conditions, co-occurring substance abuse issues, from a supervised setting into the community to live amongst the citizens of this area, this community. This is a great rehabilitation tool because we have the machine getting them going, and then they slowly step down into the community. And then at some point, if they don't need the machine anymore, then they just get the packet. Then they have the roll of packets and they can manage it on their own, which is way easier. So as far as I'm concerned, when Joel was talking about having this in a lot of different places, I see the utilization of this happening in so many places where med errors are high. Some people thought, like, why am I going to put a machine like this where I already have staff watching what's going on? That's the place to put it, because that's where the human error really occurs. So hospitals, nursing homes, I'd want this machine for my mother or my sister or my kids or my wife, because I have faith that the error rate on this is going to be so low. So, having this error rate now where we have close to 90 machines that we're doing this, having this partnership with Terrapin Pharmacy and Joel, having this ability to sort of really understand what's happening with medication adherence. There's universities like Hopkins that have whole, departments just trying to figure this thing out. And that's why, from my perspective, it wasn't a surprise that NIH said, hey, National Institute of Health wants to see what's going on with this thing, because the adherence issue is such a big, big problem.
Let me ask this in terms of money. So where does the funding come for people to have these machines? What's the cost thing? What's going on here? I mean, Dimitri,
well,
either one.
Well, we've invested in this.
Right.
We're paying a monthly fee for this.
Okay.
And the reason I do that is because what is the cost of one error?
Right.
The liability around medication error exists there. What is the cost of the staff not now worrying about medications? I mean, I used to have staff and they'd be just so anxious. They'd have 10 medications on the table and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And now they don't think about it. They just hit the button, people get their medicine, and now they can think about, well, how am I going to get this person to live on their own? How can I make sure that they understand how to be a good tenant, understand a tenant rights, maintain an apartment, cook, clean, everything that we all take for granted.
Well, let me say, so I mean, in terms of we talk about fee. So is the fees coming from the pharmacy? Is it coming from individuals? What's that all about?
As an organization, we're paying for it because we see it as a good investment.
Okay.
So the individual's not paying for this.
Okay.
The organization is invested in this because the cost savings. The problem with prevention, as you probably know, no one can ever really put a price on it.
Right.
But I can as a CEO. I can tell you the fact that I can sleep really well at night because I know I have these machines and that I don't have to worry about this really very high error rate when I first walked in. And the reality is it's probably way higher because the research will show you that the reporting issue is a big problem because people don't want to admit they made a mistake.
So I mean, so I mean, we're talking about like these things being out in the homes and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I mean, which is like millions of people. Right now, assuming that this is fairly small in terms of its operation, but I mean, once you start getting out into the big world, does this become financially feasible?
Well, you think about, for example, 5% of the Medicaid population and the Medicare population costs 50% of the entire budget. 1% costs 25% of the entire Medicaid Medicare budget. Why is that? Because they have complex medical needs and they're going in and out of the ER and hospital. And the cost for a hospital stay, $1,500 average, $2,000 average, just for one event. So if you think about bending the cost curve, you and I, who may not have complex issues, we are cheap to the healthcare system, you know? I know from my health insurance plan, I cost a couple $1,000s a year. It's not a lot of money. I go see my primary care doc, get my high blood pressure medicine, I go to the dentist. I'm not really expensive. So where are you going to find the money? You're going to find the money in that 5%. Who's in the 5%? Half of those people are people in end of stage life. The other half are people with complex medical needs and psychiatric issues. So when you bend the cost curve, the first way to do that is to deal with medication adherence. So if you can control diabetes, which is a huge reason why people go to the ER, if you can control COPD because people can't breathe and they're freaking out and they go to the hospital, if you can control people's ability to deal with addiction and not go to the hospital, that's where you get the savings. The problem is you have to do the upfront investment.
Right, exactly. So how does all this sound to you? Particularly as a government official, you've got to deal with the things that come to you. What do you think?
Well, anything that we can do to bend the curve, as Dimitri says, on healthcare costs, that's a positive. There is the whole issue that the hospitals are dealing with their global budgets and keeping people out of the hospital, particularly those that frequent the hospital emergency department and or are readmitted on a frequent basis. And it sounds like this could help alleviate some of that.
Well, we've been speaking with Joel Feldman. He's president of Terrapin Pharmacy and Medadherent, LLC. Also, Dimitri Kavathis. He's the CEO of the Lower Shore Clinic. And also, Lori Brewster, who is the health officer for Wacomico and Somerset County. I appreciate you all stopping by and chatting. And I know that particularly as the population ages, we'll probably be talking more and more about this. I appreciate you guys stopping by and chatting.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.